This is Global Order. I am Hindol Sengupta. I am delighted today to be talking to Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar. Air Marshal Kumar had a very specific and interesting role in the Indian Armed Forces. He used to be the head of India's Strategic Forces Command, which essentially looks after all of India's nuclear assets. I invited Air Marshal Kumar to talk to me because of an article he recently wrote explaining what more India needed to do at a time when there seems to be a renewed arms race, a nuclear arms race between China and America. Air Marshal Kumar, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on your show.
I want to at the very beginning request you to explain the role that that your division, the division that you headed, a lot of people may not exactly understand what keeping or maintaining India's nuclear assets really means. So perhaps to begin with, you could give us a context of what the Strategic Forces Command really does.
Okay, so if you recollect, the strategic weapons were developed by our scientists, and they were directly controlled by the Prime Minister's office. And when we carried out the tests in 1998, the world was surprised. But in all this, excitement, I think the one element that was missing in the whole game were the armed forces. And the chief at that time has gone on record to say that, we are not aware of our strategic doctrine as well as our which direction we are taking. In fact, General Sundarji in his book much earlier also had written that it's strange that the armed forces do not have a role to play in our strategic weapons program. But nevertheless, after the tests, I think it became quite obvious that we had to have a nuclear doctrine. And then we also needed an organization that would look at holding these weapons and employing them should that time ever come. Of course, we always hope that the time for any nuclear war never comes. But the fact is that we need to be prepared in order to be credible. For any nuclear doctrine to be credible, it has to be seen. The actions on ground also have to be seen as in context with that. One cannot just have a doctrine and expect that the other side would get deterred. So, Strategic Forces Command was created to take charge of the weapons that had been developed and to take charge of the delivery vehicles that are necessary and exercise operational control over them. And in doing so, it ensures that the minimum credible deterrence that we're talking about is amply signaled to the adversaries. And there always needs to be somebody who has to be at some level of readiness in times of crisis to enable the nuclear weapons to be employed should they ever be needed to be employed. Again, I state that we hope that nuclear war never comes. Even in this conflict of Russia and Ukraine, there has been a lot of nuclear posturing on both sides. And but no nuclear weapons have been used. So nuclear weapons are normally used as a means of deterrence. And to have a credible deterrence, you have to have a force in being, and you have to have some custodians of these weapons who will take charge at the right time in order to employ them if necessary.
You spoke about India's nuclear doctrine, and you also spoke about the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course, conflict at various levels, also expanding to the Gaza war. Now the Gaza war is expanding between Israel and Hezbollah now. As we can see, there could be other conflicts developing in other parts of the world. In such a scenario, do you think India's nuclear doctrine needs re-examination to make it, in a sense, future ready? Or do you think what we have today is adequate?
So India's nuclear doctrine has been reviewed many times since it's been published. A draft nuclear doctrine was published in 1999. And it outlines what we would do in case of a nuclear conflict, or what is the kind of deterrence that we wish to have. Now, it rests on three pillars. The first pillar is minimum credible deterrence. The second pillar is no first use. And the third pillar is massive retaliation. So I'll try and explain some of these aspects one by one. See, minimum credible deterrence means that you must be able to show that you have a deterrent capability against the adversary whom you wish to deter. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you go hell for leather and create thousands of nuclear weapons in a kind of crazy arms race that the US and USSR had during the Cold War. It is a minimum credible deterrence because these weapons are expensive. They're expensive to make, expensive to field, expensive to maintain. Therefore, for an economy like ours, a minimum credible deterrence makes sense so long as the enemy is deterred. If the enemy is not deterred, then we can look at what our minimum credible deterrence should really look like. Because credibility of your deterrence depends on two factors. One is the kind and number of weapons that you have. And secondly, are they survivable? Since you have a doctrine of no first use, the fact is that they should survive the first strike. Only then they are credible. So these factors make up the credible part of it. No first use is a policy that we have made sure that we have advanced knowingly and in a very straightforward manner to say that we don't look for nuclear war. And we will wait and absorb the first strike. And then after, we will carry out a massive retaliation that will cause unacceptable damage to the adversary. And this is the way we would like to employ our nuclear weapons. And they are primarily weapons of deterrence. In the recent past, there have been much criticism of the no first use policy. In fact, the no first use policy has been reviewed many times. In fact, two defense ministers have stated that it holds for now and it should be reviewed, or words to that effect. These words have been kind of pounced upon by detractors of the doctrine to say that India's no first use is not very credible. They could go to first use anytime, so on and so forth. But if we are going to use our nuclear weapons as weapons of deterrence, then I think no first use makes much more sense. Because once you have first use, then you have to change your entire force structure as well as your methodology in order to carry out the first strike. And what would you do after carrying out the first strike? I mean, what would you target? You obviously would try to target the enemy's nuclear weapons, which are going to be always well hidden and maybe deep underground. So how much success will you achieve? I mean, if a decapitating strike was so simple and easy, I'm sure America would have done it to North Korea by now. So a first strike is not very, I mean, it makes sense to certain countries to do so, but it doesn't make sense to a country like India I don't think we will reach a crisis stage of that nature wherein we would require to do a nuclear first strike on some other nation. Um, I think what we are clearly signaling is that we are a strong power. We have our own security interests, and our security interests lie in making sure that nobody can blackmail us nuclearly, or nobody can threaten us with nuclear weapons and get away with it. We will make sure that we have enough deterrence against such nations or such adversaries should the time come. So I think the nuclear doctrine has been reasonably well thought out. It has been reviewed internally many times. It's not in the public domain so much, but I think most analysts have agreed that no first use is something that needs to be retained. The other portion that has been criticized is, the massive retaliation. Mainly, the arguments against massive retaliation are that it's not credible. Say, for example, against China, how will you do massive retaliation, etc., etc. And the other part is that if somebody fires one weapon at you, why would you let go your entire arsenal on that person? Because it's not proportional. I think, proportionality argument goes out of the window when the first nuclear weapon is used. If you're fighting a conventional war and somebody uses a nuclear weapon against you, that person has already stepped out of proportion. And therefore, to expect you to be proportional after that, I think is expecting too much. And also, when it comes to a larger adversary like China, I personally feel that we have means to carry out massive retaliation today. Maybe some time ago we may have fallen short in some areas, but I think now we can do massive retaliation, towards China as well. And when we say massive retaliation, it means unacceptable damage. Something that the adversary would really not like to be done to their country. And that capability, I think we have, and we should continue to retain.
You mentioned a whole bunch of things. One of the things I wanted to, and including no first use, of course, we know, and scholars have debated this and written about this extensively, that Pakistan, in a sense, does not trust India's no first use, which is why there was this entire thing about tactical nuclear weapons at one point, to which, in a sense, India developed its own cold start doctrine. At least the assumption is that India had a cold start doctrine, which wasn't perhaps explicitly, ever detailed out, but there was an assumption that it has one, and there was a response to that, and so on and so forth. Now, today we are at the age where, other kinds of methodologies are being discussed and deliberated, including delivery of smaller nuclear weapons, perhaps using drones and so on and so forth. We saw the swarm of drone attack that Israel faced in the war in Gaza. Talk to us a little bit about India's preparation in such scenarios, which, Paul, might emerge in the coming years, and which are really non-traditional in that sense.
Okay, so non-traditional, delivery of weapons has been something that has been discussed. We talked about the suitcase bomb earlier, and now we're talking drones. But to the best of my knowledge, there are no real such weapons that exist in the world today, and definitely not in the hands of non-governmental actors. So at the moment, most nuclear assets are well accounted for and are well within the control of state actors. And the current possibility that such a scenario emerges from a non-state actor is not as high as is normally felt in the media, etc. But having said that, can state actors deliver a nuclear weapon through drones? It's a possibility in the future. remember, drones are they are short distance and short endurance kind of things. Which these are the drones that cannot be detected, or have low probability of detection. And we are trying to find ways and means to detect those as well. But the fact is that small drones can't carry these nuclear weapons very far. So if you have mid-sized or large-scale drones, it's as good as an aircraft. You've seen the way medium altitude drones and high altitude drones have been shot down in the Ukrainian war, as well as even Houthis are shooting them down now. So the fact is that these such drones are vulnerable, and therefore I don't think that any state actor would like to use some of these drones. Yeah, there's always the possibility of an element of surprise, etc., etc., and we need to be prepared for that. So that's not to say that we should, just dismiss them out of hand. But the fact is that for a person who's wanting to, for a state actor who's wanting to actually launch a nuclear attack, at the moment there are better delivery vehicles available than drones, which will give him a far more sense of confidence to be able to successfully complete the task that he set himself out to do. So that's where drones stand. But the fact is that when it comes to tactical nuclear weapons, there's been a lot of debate on tactical nuclear weapons. This debate has not just been in India. It's been in Pakistan, it's been in China, and so on and so forth. Russia and the US, as you know, already possess tactical nuclear weapons. Pakistan possesses tactical nuclear weapons, and they have a policy. In China, there was a huge debate on tactical nuclear weapons, and for the moment, it appears that China does not wish to go the tactical nuclear weapon way, because tactical nuclear weapons are basically weapons for nuclear warfighting. And many state actors, and the famous Reagan Gorbachev statement that nuclear wars should never be fought because they cannot be won. So nuclear warfighting is something that some states feel that they can look at, but there are other states who feel that it is going to end up in a full-fledged nuclear exchange, and therefore it shouldn't really be something that one is looking at. In fact, even though one or two op-ed reviews from China have been leaning in favor of tactical nuclear weapons, but one of their strategic think tanks actually made a statement saying that on tactical nuclear weapons, we should formulate our own policy and not be led by our nose through Western thought. So there are many aspects to tactical nuclear weapons, many pros and cons. And personally, I feel that for India, tactical nuclear weapons doesn't seem to be a very good choice.
We'll come to China in just 1 second, Air Marshal. But before we move on to China, I have one last question on Pakistan. In your opinion, does Pakistan have full spectrum deterrence?
So Pakistan, firstly, doesn't have a published or a written doctrine. Their doctrine is articulated mainly through General Khalid Kidwai, who was the head of the Special Plans Division. And in about 2003 or thereabouts, I think, he articulated these 4 red lines for Pakistan, the space threshold, the military threshold, the economic threshold, and the political threshold. That if India crosses any one of these, then that would kind of trigger a nuclear exchange. So Pakistan's doctrine, as articulated by him, is the first part is that Pakistan's weapons are solely aimed at India. And they talk about first use. And when they developed the tactical nuclear weapon on the Nasr missile, the reasoning they followed was what you had mentioned earlier about the cold start doctrine. But personally, I think they have perhaps misunderstood the cold start doctrine. In any case, the cold start doctrine was never articulated. It was only spoken about in terms of when the war would start. You know, if you recollect during Parakram, it took a while to mobilize all our troops. So I think everybody wanted to cut down those times, and that's why they articulated how quickly they could start in case it's not, it was really, if you ask me, it wasn't a doctrine. So, since the word was used in the media, I think Pakistan perhaps interpreted it in the manner that they wish to interpret it, or perhaps used it as some kind of a prop to justify their holding of tactical nuclear weapons. And they claim at the moment that they have vectors that can target, from close ranges till 2750 kilometers, which means that they can target almost the whole of India. And not only that, they have different types of weapons that will allow them to target tactical targets, operational targets, as well as strategic targets. So that is what they mean by full spectrum deterrence, that they have weapons that are operated by the land forces, air forces, sea forces, and all of them can target tactical, operational, and strategic targets, and therefore they feel that they have full spectrum deterrence. Personally, Pakistan is welcome to do whatever kind of doctrine they wish to adapt, but full spectrum deterrence, how does it give them more deterrence than normal deterrence, is something that I haven't really been able to understand very well. To develop such a wide variety of weapons and still have the same level of deterrence that one would have had with a lesser spectrum of weapons, perhaps they have enough resources to do that, or their priorities are such. If you remember Bhutto's statement that we'll eat grass, but we'll have nuclear weapons. So I think they are pretty much heading in that direction.
Let's talk a little bit about China now, Marshall. Your article spoke about China's expansion of its nuclear assets and strategic assets in response to, in a sense, an arms race with America. What kind of expansion are you seeing? And is India being able to adequately respond to such a race?
So we need to understand that China's expansion of the nuclear arsenal is based on two factors. One is that if they are to seriously challenge the US as the number one country in the world, which is their ambition to be a world leader, and to have a world-class military. These are stated objectives through white papers and other policy statements by no less than Xi Jinping. So now, if they are to achieve such aims, obviously their current arsenal of around 350 weapons, or they had 250 to 350 earlier, just a couple of years ago, appeared inadequate in that respect. And especially as they got hold of this DF-26, which can carry dual warheads, which dual capable, I think they definitely felt that they needed to increase the number of warheads. The other part is they were also getting a little, shaken up by the fact that in technology terms, the US had gone very far ahead of them in nuclear technology and in deployment of some of the weapons, nuclear weapons. So they seriously felt that their second strike capability or the survivability of the nuclear weapons in case US does a first strike could come under threat, because if you look at their triad, their bomber cannot reach the US. It's mainly a regional bomber. Of course, they're building a newer one. So the air element was, a little short. Could perhaps just go up to Hawaii or back, something like that. Then the number of submarines and the kind of missiles on them, as well as the noisiness of those submarines, were also causing some concern. So, considering that they had to get out from the South China Sea, which has its own unique characteristics, they felt that they could be detected and interdicted. And also their missiles, initially the JL-2s required the submarines to travel quite a distance before they could launch their weapons. With the new JL-3s, of course, that problem is solved to a large extent. And the numbers that they had, considering all these factors, they felt that this leg of the triad was also slightly incomplete. And so if the US focused on targeting their ICBMs, they might be in some kind of trouble. And, the US has done 2 or 3 things which worried them a bit. One was that the initial detection of launch by the SBIRS satellites. And so would there be a issue of, launch interdiction? There were also issues of left of launch capabilities that could have been utilized to neutralize some of their ICBMs. And lastly, the ballistic missile defense has matured quite a bit on the US side, and you've seen this time when Iran launched the missiles at Israel, the ballistic missile interceptor, specifically the SM-6, has performed very well. And also there has been one documented exo-atmospheric interception of a ballistic missile. So this worries Chinese that they may not be able to retaliate in case of a first strike by the US. So they have decided to increase their numbers. So you see there are 3 big silo fields coming up for the last 5 to 6 years, in various portions of China, central China specifically. And these are now going to house more number of missiles. And CIPRI has estimated that from 250, they've already come up to 350 warheads. And these warheads will now, excuse me, perhaps, get increased to as much as 1,000 warheads over the next decade or so. So if that happens, that is a substantial increase in China's arsenal. And that will have ramifications for India as well. So we have to keep a close watch on it. We should not match them number for number, because I think getting into a nuclear arms race is a waste of resources. We should stick to our minimum credible deterrence. Now, of course, the minimum credible deterrence, the numbers will change in case the adversary numbers change. We don't have to match them warhead for warhead, but we may have to increase certain set of numbers. And I think the Indian security establishment is well aware of these developments, and they have, their plans to make sure that we do not be at the receiving end of, such an expansion of both, in fact, China and Pakistan.
In the essay you wrote, Air Marshal, you suggested strengthening 2 parts of our triad. One, of course, was the missile part. The other, of course, was our nuclear capabilities, nuclear submarine capabilities. Could you elaborate on both of these 2 things, please?
Okay, so I think in the article, I said that I think we are doing well enough on the missile side, we have the Agni 5, and now we have the MIRV capability. So that, to an extent, makes it more difficult for China's ballistic missile defense to, interdict all the necessary warheads. And do remember that MIRV vehicles also carry some decoys, so it does become even more difficult. So therefore, and also we have missiles with, a bit of a hypersonic glide capability. So I think we are well positioned to on our land side, and we have adequate technology to be able to build up our numbers and be ready for any eventuality should that ever come up. In terms of
Nuclear subs.
nuclear submarines, it's very I think the program is going well, and we should have a very, very credible continuous at-sea deterrence shortly, and we will continue from there. Finally, on the air element, I think it is also there's time to now develop an air-launched ballistic missile. This will, strengthen our triad to a large extent. There have been many talks about having a strategic bomber as a leg of the triad. While having a strategic bomber is always a good thing to have, but its costs are quite prohibitive. And maybe we need to look at options that are much more cheaper, but produce the same effect. So in that respect, I think an ALBM will go in a long way.
How do you think that would be possible to get something which would be cost effective but will have the same impact as far as a strategic bomber is concerned?
So like I said, maybe on our heavier fighters, we could use an air-launched ballistic missile with a good range, and that should meet our requirements. So I think the good thing about the air portion of the triad is that it's very flexible. It can be launched from any base. The enemy will always be guessing as to which base you're launching it from, which direction you're launching it from. And even if a couple of bases get destroyed, there's adequate reserve capacity available to launch from various sections. And of course, the aircraft has to penetrate air defense, and it can penetrate. China is a large country, bound to have gaps. So that's something that's a good option that one should always keep in mind. The various levels, the legs of the triad, as technology increases, will rise and fall in their significance. But their significance can never be such that they would not be required anymore. There are countries which have only one leg of the triad. For example, UK has only nuclear submarines. It doesn't have ICBMs. It doesn't have bombers anymore. And that's a decision purely based on economics. France has only two legs, that is the air and submarine. It doesn't have missiles. So every nation, based on its security requirements, will always try to have as flexible a nuclear force as it needs to ensure that they have second strike capability.
Before we go, Marshal, I have one last question for you, which is in the non-nuclear domain, which is about, recent reports as of today suggest that our strategic partnerships have not worked as well as they ought to have, perhaps. Why do you think that's true? What more can we do there?
So I think strategic partnerships was a part of the defense procurement policy and was brought in to get more partners to kind of produce it in India. These high technology items, and this was done quite some time ago. I think PP 16 or 12. I don't remember exactly, but it's been a while since this policy has been in place. And the fact is that there have been no such partners who've been willing to come forward. Whether it was our MMRCA program or now the MRFA program or our conventional submarine program, these strategic partnerships have not worked because I think that the partners felt that they couldn't part with the technology that we were asking for. The ecosystem of manufacturing was such that many parts would be required to be manufactured outside India, and that would increase the costs tremendously. But now with the Make in India, mantra that we have, the ecosystem is rapidly evolving. Many processes, parts, which could be made in India earlier are now being made, and not only being made, they're being made and exported to the same very countries who are, expected to part with their technology and, make a partnership out of it. So it hasn't worked so far. Will it work in the future? I'm not so sure, because I think our focus also has shifted somewhat in the sense that we really want to make this Make in India work. And I think there's a lot of emphasis from government, and there's a lot of excitement in the private sector as well on Make in India. So I think if strategic partnerships come our way, where people are willing to part with technology and we do the investment, I think some things could work out. Otherwise, I think Make in India perhaps is the way to go.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar, for really insightful comments on our strategic scenario today, and indeed looking into the future. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.